It's Fourth Friday on a Saturday, March 2022. I'm the Artist D, and with me, as always, the amazing Attasalina.
Hello.
Hello. How
Hello.
are we in this roaring March?
Oh, well, we're
We're
roaring.
roaring. We
Yes.
really are.
Yes. We get up, we put on our red lipstick, and we face the world. Even if we want to punch it in the face.
I like it. Yes, it's true. True. Because you got to keep rolling. As I
Got
continue
it.
to remind myself every day, do you ever just want to get into that absolute panicked, stricken in fear, hiding in the corner? That
Yeah,
hits me.
5 minutes ago.
That hits me a lot. Yes. Same. 10 minutes ago, I was sitting on the couch doing the same thing. But we're here and we're alive and we're happy and we're fabulous.
We're fabulous.
And last month's, which feels like last week. In fact, it's so was compacted. This month is so compacted for me that I did a podcast last Fourth Friday before our last show, and literally have not done anything since until today. I
Wow.
came back on, and all the settings were still here. I haven't done podcasts for a month. Apparently, I've just been missing in action for a month,
Wow. Yeah.
and I don't know where I've been. That's the
Oh
scary
no.
part.
It has been it's been a hell of a month. It's been a hell of a month. It feels like everything, that's gone on for a long time now is just compressing and hitting the wall, and everybody's watching the war in Ukraine,
Yes.
and the pandemic's not over, but the pandemic's over,
Right.
and
Everyone's back to normal. I'm attending. You would freak out. I'm attending football games in
ah,
our local stadium, and it's just
mm,
full. And I
just
count like maybe 3 masks on folks, but yeah, it's back to normal.
yeah, I'm definitely um I was definitely this last month, and
See,
last week, yesterday. I was definitely feeling uh that sensation of being left behind, which I know a
hmm
lot of people with disabilities are feeling. There was this very strange sensation when the pandemic hit for a lot of us, I think, with chronic illnesses and disabilities, that suddenly the world was getting a little bit of a taste of our reality. And not that we enjoyed that or anything, but it was in some ways, I think we were more viscerally aware of what was going on and how horrible it was and how long term it was going to be, because of our situation, and we could really empathize with what was going on. But it was also like, wow, people are actually experiencing a taste of what our lives are like. And that was a little bit nice to feel like you were part of the like, the irony is, as everybody was becoming not part of the world,
right,
we felt like we were part
the
of the
normal.
world, because the world now had been equalized to some degree. We were all
Yes,
at home, we were all struggling with illnesses and the risk of death, and
right.
we were dealing with the same issues.
Same thing.
But
And
now it's like everybody's like, nope, that's done, and we're over here just like,
well,
okay, well,
as
did
the
we
populace, the society does, they've shafted you even more.
yeah, it's like, okay, so 2 years of this, and we've learned nothing, and we've accomplished nothing, and I'm not in the most like uplifted mood right now about things. I'm like, it's almost worse now than
Yes.
before
Yes.
this
hmm
happened.
hmm
It seems like there's even more of this like crack the whip
mm
expectation than there was even before the pandemic started.
Yes. Yes, and then
Like,
in doing that after giving people a taste of what they should be doing in a freer sense at home, doing your own thing, being responsible for yourself, to work, whatever. Suddenly now it's even worse of get back to that cube, back on that
Yeah.
wheel.
And we just lost, the Arctic shelf the size of New York
Yes.
in Antarctica, like gone, a record temperature. It's
Wow.
just, I mean, it's been insane my whole life, but it feels like, unfortunately, that, a lot of times when confronted with things, it just reinforces a deeper entrenchment of denial rather than,
Yeah.
unfortunately, actually doing transformative work, which does kind of lead us into our theme.
Indeed. I
Um,
need some LSD after this.
well, that was the thing is that, we were talking about what we wanted to speak about, and we had done this whole rabbit hole thing with Jack Parsons and all the connectivity with the military industrial complex and Hollywood and cults and the New Age and all the people and the culture that was happening at that time. And that's, a lot of the people in that era, like Krishnamurti, for example, who was the prophet of the Theosophical Society, was saying, the house is burning down. We don't have time. We have to change now, and we have to change, not talk about being changed. And it's still true. Almost 100 years later, what led to the New Age movement as we know it, and the LSD movement, and the consciousness movement, and the civil rights movement, and all the anti-war movement, all of this stuff was because of this, the insanity of industrialized civilization that was going on at that time, and everything that it's led to, and then going into World War II and continuing onwards. And of course, people were looking for a solution. So LSD, that was the original theory on LSD. The reason why, well, okay, we'll start with this, okay? And then we'll discuss.
Okay.
The reason why Timothy Leary went his particular direction. So there was a number of people involved in the LSD research, and they were at Harvard, and they got kicked out of Harvard. And in the early days, and this is part of how my godmother and my godfather were involved, is because in the early days, they were dosing elites, basically. Liberal elites, you could say. So they were dosing, artists and philosophers and creative people, and they were exploring what LSD was and what it did to the mind. So then, not sure the exact timeline, but Leary gets kicked out of Harvard, and he's having all of these LSD parties. And Henry Dennison and Ruth Dennison were at these LSD parties, and they're doing all of this stuff, and they're cultivating kind of a whole ideology around, changing the consciousness, changing the society, and what the role of LSD could be. And Leary's tune in, turn on, and drop out became the theory that no, you have to dose everybody. You can't just dose a few artists and intellectuals. This has to be an egalitarian movement in which everybody's consciousness is expanded, and this is theoretically going to be some kind of key to a shortcut, basically, in transforming the society, because the society is just so locked in its rigid form. So
Would have been fabulous.
So anyway, that's what was going. That's kind of what was going on in that whole milieu, and that's what led, for example, my godmother to be one of the pioneer teachers of meditation, is because she was doing all of that. And, LSD is not without casualties. Right. It's not quite the whole, drug mania trip but people do have mental breaks on the stuff. It's kind of designed to do that. and it can go well or it can go not so well. And so she became known for being this person who talked to the people down on LSD. She was the one who kind of had this natural ability to sit with people and bring them down to earth and ground them. And that was how she kind of became, that's kind of what she was known for well before she was considered an official spiritual leader or anything like that. And then she got more serious into meditation and kind of decided that that was the real thing. LSD had its points, but it had its limits. Right. Also. It could introduce you into something and it could have a profound effect, but you need somewhere to go. You need something. And for her, she thought that meditation practice was a way to go further, basically. Yeah.
That was, it's a stepping stone. It breaks the wall. And Timothy Leary is another one of those, much like Jack Parsons, who had that cosmic spider web to everybody else. Then you get into Timothy Leary and he leads the same type of rabbit hole, really finishes it up for me as far as Jack Parsons and everybody we mentioned before, and then everybody that Timothy Leary was connected with. I don't know much about him other than basics. I have not looked too far into much detail, but definitely sounds like he was onto something every time I kind of come across another thing of Timothy Leary or another person that I know of that was connected to him. And the LSD and psilocybin experience, I've never had the pleasure of doing.
Really?
Really. Because I feel like it's not as available now because of everything's so tainted as far as drug wise. I've always felt like it's not safe enough now to experiment because I have no one that I could trust to obtain it from, and I have not had that pleasure. I would like to, though. We'll just put that out there, people.
Well, message received,
yes.
But I'm not going to say any more on the internet.
Perfect. I do know a lot of people, and it's kind of probably straying already, but in the ayahuasca experience and the DMT and everything there, I have what would you say, supervised? I have supervised the trips of others, and much like your godmother, right, Ruth? Okay. I felt very much at peace with like doing that for other people. And it was very fascinating for me, especially with the ayahuasca experience. It takes so long. So long, and I am very impatient, but to see these people go through these transformations and to see whatever they're seeing, it's a lot like the YouTube videos of like during the Timothy Leary time frame where they were videotaping people on LSD and what they were seeing, and when they think they're seeing through things, or they're tasting the colors, all that stuff. That's what I'm seeing with ayahuasca folks is this like amazement of life around them. And that must be very interesting for them, especially when they don't have that at all. Like as an artist, I think I kind of get it a little bit because like Salvador Dali said, I don't take drugs, I am drugs. I think I'm along those lines, because anytime I have like a drug experience, it's like it's not doing what it does for other people, but I'm already kind of unlocked. I already see a lot of the weird shit.
Well, absolutely. I think, people have very different perceptual experiences, and I think that's was part of the Vipassana meditation stuff, and I think also the LSD stuff to illustrate that to people, because what happens is we assume that this singular way of seeing the world and interpreting the world, we get so adjusted to it that we think that's the absolute reality, what our conditioned reality is. And so any experience that allows people to shift that point of view and experience something through their sensory experience that they're not used to shows them that there's limitations to their sensory experience, that's just the way we're interpreting information. You put some LSD in your brain and the information coming in starts to look very different, but you're bringing in the same exact information. You're just altering the way your brain is processing information. And so it's trying to enlighten people to that effect, that they are creating, to a great degree, the way they're not creating reality, but they are creating the way they perceive reality. And that perception of reality inherently creates the way we experience reality, that our subjective experience is very subjective. And so obviously subjective is subjective. I feel like the new age, we talk about like the new age stuff and then like all the fucked up shit with it, because like people say some weird stuff, like, so then it's like, yeah, the world, your life is a hologram and reality is a hologram and you're creating it. It's like, no, I don't think so. There is objective reality. We don't live in objective reality. Maybe that is God. Maybe the concept of objective reality is like the concept of God, and that could be tapped into to some degree. But as subjective beings, we don't exist in that objective reality. We just exist in our subjective reality. And that's what I think that people are trying to get across. And so the whole you create your own reality, yes, to a point, to a point where the external reality butts up against it and says,
the
reality
key,
check,
the key
right?
of perception everywhere. I mean, everyone's perception, yes.
Yeah, so that's the whole spiritual bypass that we're all so familiar with. And like we're talking about, so we had this crisis, right, of the last 2 years with the pandemic, and people's reality was very altered, and perhaps their perception of reality was altered, and a lot of things were confronted. So when people are taking LSD or ayahuasca or going on meditation retreat or whatever they're doing, they're coming up against the limits of their perception, and they react to that experience in many different ways. I think is what we can really say about the entire consciousness movement, is all the different ways people then decide what that experience is. And a lot of times that can really contribute to more delusion, more denial, and all of that, because they're not prepared to accept, a more truthful understanding of that experience, because it injures their own egocentric position ultimately, which we're all dealing with. And that's just, it's just the way, and so that's kind of the whole point of a lot of these spiritual practices. It's like, well, you can have, this is my godmother's position. And now I've been very triggered by a lot of events that's bringing up a lot about my life today. And my godmother is a very good example in that she carried a lot of wisdom, and she also reinforced a lot of pretty negative, I'm not sure what the right word is, but narratives that are pervasive in a lot of these communities that I have, for myself, spent many years of my life trying to vet their validity or lack thereof. And yeah, they're just false. It's just like, there's a lot of false narratives going on that is not really addressing the truth of the situation, that's ultimately looking for a little bit of a magical solution to something that cannot be solved in one person's lifetime. It's a generational, when you're dealing with trauma, it's a generational problem, and it's going to be a generational solution. There's no fix. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that there's no recovery, but you can't undo what's been done. And I feel like a lot of the spiritual bypassing is this fantasy that you can somehow just move beyond it. And that is that's a selfish position, that you want to get away from your own pain. I understand. But in fact, you're committing more generational trauma, because you're passing that narrative on to the next generation, and it's a lie. And now they're going to pass on more generational trauma because the resolution of that generational trauma is facing what's going on and not perpetrating it. And if you're lying about it, you are perpetrating it. And that is why it keeps fucking happening. So there.
Yes. Yes. And it makes me think about, like, I don't want to use the word small-minded, but I shall. Especially like pandemic wise, like just the simplicity of that. And we talked about it for a year already on this show, as far as like where people are and where some others are, like ourselves, but like just taking them out of the workplace, out of the cubicle for a year, like shattered them and did something to them, like a drug trip would, and made them realize these things. So when most people are coming from there, as far as that little bit of something shattered their reality and changed their perception, and then you go all the way over, turn it up to 11 over here with some LSD or some meditation and some thinking outside the box, and it's like, of course they can't handle it. They've just gotten over the cubicle. They just realized they didn't have to work for a living. That's like, we did that years ago.
Yeah, no, it's a whole thing, and they want to shove that down as quickly and as intensely as possible, because that, of course, is the whole trip that everybody was, trying to break out of, in terms of the LSD movements, the civil rights movements, the consciousness movements, the anti-war movement. All of it's all, again, as Bell Hooks would say, completely intersectional, in that, we're dealing with the same system and how it's applying itself into all these different groups. And this requirement that you live a certain way and identify a certain way, simply to participate again in the system that is based again in a particular philosophy, no evidence of it being authentic at all, and it's basically just based on land theft. I mean, that's all empire is. It's just stealing land and then making up some bullshit story about God to justify it. I mean, that goes back to the fucking Romans. That goes back to before they appropriated Christianity. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and it doesn't change. It's just fucking land thieves and their gaslight. And the pandemic has shone a light on that for a lot of people. And we're in it's such a weird place in the society right now, like coming up out in kind of a lot of that epicenter of the consciousness movement and being raised in a lot of new age bullshit about how we're all saving the fucking world, and all of this stuff. And all this spiritual bypassing and manipulation, because of course, that is the original LSD tests were being used by the government to see how they could be used for mind control. So there is a lot to be said to that, and that people use all of this. It's just a tool.
Further our society.
Well, it's again the meditation, all the spiritual practices, the LSD. They all have a light side and a dark side. Like, they can be used. They themselves have no particular quality one way or the other. They're just knowledge, and that knowledge can be used for any number of things. And so all these cult leaders have used it to manipulate their flock, to get followers to participate essentially in this military industrial land thieving money they wouldn't be doing it if there was nothing to be gained, so our society creates the structure in which being a manipulator is rewarded and not being a manipulator is punished. I mean, that is the society we live in. So that was the whole consciousness movement, again, in terms of learning how to stop being a predator, learn how to stop being a fucking vampire, narcissist, abuser, rape culture asshole, because that was the culture. And learn how to become an actual human being. That's what it's all about, no matter whether you're sitting with Native Americans or you're sitting with the fucking gurus or whatever the fuck you're doing. That's what it's about. And then all these people go and get a tiny little bit of something, and they go try to lord it over these other people and telling people they're shamans and shit. I don't fucking know what they are. And they're just, I mean, they're just ignorant people ultimately, but you know, they just don't want to relinquish this fucking power trip. And on top of it, which is getting to my original point, you had a whole movement of culture of music and fashion, and everything that we take for granted now was completely rooted in that. And it was not supported, and it was completely radical. And now it's been totally co-opted. And, you know, the whole revolutionary spirit, the radical spirit of being an artist, of being a musician, of being speaking truth, and all this, as much as there is a huge evolution of movements across the board in terms of the actual establishment identity and popular culture, I'm just gonna say it. It's fucking shit. It is fucking shit. There are so few people out there with any fucking integrity. They are all so shoved so far up their asses, totally selfish, just completely full of shit. And people are just like, oh my God. And like, stop following these people. Stop caring about these people. Stop worshiping these morons because you have no self-respect because you've been treated like shit your entire life. Like, stop doing that. That's not what this should be about. And that's just, I'm so disgusted by it. I'm so sick of pretending I'm not disgusted by it. I'm so sick of hanging out with people and being like, oh yeah, okay, well, you know. No, I've never, ever liked it. I've never been interested in it. I've never respected it. And I've always only cared about these people. I've only cared about the fact that maybe they have some fucking potential to overcome this shit in their own life and become better leaders of the people, because these are people who are influencing others, who are telling them how to be. And I'm telling them, you need to fucking be better. That's why I show up, is because I think people can be better. And if they tell me they can't be better, then I fucking walk, because I'm fucking done.
As one should be. I feel the same imbalance, and I recently I've met a few people who they don't realize that they don't know that the game that has to be played, has to in quotes, and you know they're very much like, well, you know, if these are fake people, then fuck them, let's do our own thing. And it's like, yeah, but then they start to see, like, they come up against the power, and all these shitheads are cliques of powerful people, and you can only push back so much.
Oh yeah, they will try to take you down, and they get pit, like the ones who are really full of shit, like the true. I think a lot of people don't understand this, the vindictiveness of these people once they are seen. And you don't want, and if they've tried to come after you and manipulate you and get you into their trip, and you're like, no, I see you, I'm not doing that. They don't just go, okay. They are horribly vindictive people. Yes. They are furious at anything that they want that they can't have. And yeah, it's
true. And the minute that their world is disrupted, just by a ripple, just, you know, not even a wave, it's just a ripple that some of us are making out here in our reality, and the real people, you know, and that's, I've always been the real people involved in fake people shit, and they allow me in their circles just a little bit because, you know, I know how to play along, and at least I did, and it was okay. But the minute that I start to like get some traction of my own and become my own person and become an influencer myself to some other people, then it's like you start to see them using their power trips on others to make sure that I don't succeed in that. Because God forbid that I actually do form a solid base of real perception, real people, or form real organizations and clubs and put on events that, you know, are not following the standard rules.
Oh, yeah. Memories. It's
like,
well, you know what they say, no good deed goes unpunished.
Very true.
Yeah, yes. No, I know. And so
people
so
can
I
tell
grew
there's
up,
a lot bubbling under the surface here today.
Yeah, well, so I mean, it's the story of my life, you know. So, I I think, you know, it's very difficult to see clearly. It's very difficult to show up in clarity
Mm.
because there's
Yes.
so much going on, you know, and there it just is the way it is. Um, and so, um, I get it. I, when I was a kid, you know, I'm surrounded by this whole new age thing, and there's a lot of good stuff in there and a lot of good stuff that was challenging, you know, the establishment, right? You know, so this is good, right? Um, and so I'm looking at this whole thing trying to say, okay, well, the philosophy I'm like down with,
Mm.
but of course I'm looking around at all the people and none
Right.
of them, as usual, are in any way in alignment
Yes.
with the
Because
narrative.
and you're in
It,
California, so there's even more people.
yeah.
They're signing
And
up, but they're not. They have no idea what they're really doing.
no. And I'm just a dumb kid, but I'm like, but this all makes sense to me. Like, just this makes this,
Right.
you know, this stuff makes sense to me. And I'm like, being a person makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is all of you people. And what I just didn't understand that they're completely full of shit. And I still have a hard time recognizing that, even though I do,
Right.
because to me, it's not even a I mean, it is a moral issue, but setting the morality aside, it's just so irrational. It doesn't accomplish anything. I think I am kind of a goal-oriented person, and I'm like, this, this doesn't
Mm.
serve
No.
anything. This doesn't even serve what you claim to
Mm. Right.
want. Like, so it's so hard for me to get my head around just how far up their asses
Right.
they are, because I find it like it's so miserable. It's so fucking
Yes.
miserable. It's so unsuccessful ultimately. I
It,
just don't want to live like that, and I just don't understand how people can so enthusiastically
mm.
commit their entire
Well,
life.
it's so unbelievable, and that's
Like,
why, like you said before about showing up. I mean, you keep showing up. It's this glimmer of hope that you see in people, like because you can't. I the same way. I cannot believe that they really are that far up their ass.
I know. It's so boring. It's just so boring.
Yes,
It's just
so
so
boring.
boring. I don't, yeah, I don't get it. And even though I'm actually pretty, like you said, I'm very cautious. I have
Mhm.
actually, you know, managed to navigate a lot of situations that could have gone as bad as things have gone for me in my life. I mean, they could have gone worse, you
Right.
know.
Yes.
I have managed to navigate a lot of stuff. And so I am very careful as a result of that, and I am very sensitive to
Mhm.
certain things.
Mhm.
But you know, we live, this reality is difficult to negotiate, and you kind of, for the most part, just have to like work with the best you can get to a great degree.
Right.
Not to be an asshole, but you know,
Yeah.
people have been an asshole to me for a long time.
Yes.
Maybe I should just start, you know, being a little more of an asshole.
Well,
uh,
and I'm
this playing
saying
nice thing
yes.
is like,
Mm,
yeah, if
yeah.
it were legit, then that would be
Mhm.
fine. But
Yeah.
in
And
any case,
and though there are some very good examples right now that come to mind of, I mean, some people they're so. I know this one person right now who is so genuine and such an asshole, like like totally what we would like to be, like just push back on everything, call everybody on their shit, and it's really fucking them up because you can't do that. You
nope.
can't do anything in this society if you push that hard, and you gotta play.
I know. I know. I'm
But
so sick of it.
with the Timothy Leary and everything, with meditation, and that's the other thing is people go into these trances or these moments to get their moment of freedom and realization, but they have nowhere to come back to. They come back to this. They come back to where
Yep.
they left off, especially Jesus, if they're all the way trapped in that pre-pandemic world of the workaday hamster wheel, and then they have a trip, then they go back to that. I mean, no wonder they want to jump out a window.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
important
exactly.
to come
Well,
back to
that's the thing.
something else, to change your reality.
Well, that's the thing that's just so astonishing with everybody just saying so caught up in their negativity. And you just see the posts, the comments online, of course, always, every time you read the comments, it's just shit. It's just the people who have the shittiest things to say. And it's like, yeah, it's such a conditioned state. Um, and so unnecessary, so unhelpful, to the society and the planet at large. People have been calling out the situation for a very long time. And, then we had this whole revolution or whatever, which did accomplish quite a lot. In fact, so much that we experienced a huge backlash and co-opting because it was, way too successful. So let's give that credit where credit's due. These people were insane as much as they were so compromised and flawed. Many of these people, I'm not talking about the evil psychos that have, wormed their way in, but many of these people were extremely radical for their time, and were risking being, put in jail, and many were put in jail. A lot of shit went down.
Leary
People
was, a lot of
people
others
were
were
killed, people, I mean, shit went down. And I grew up with that. I don't know if they grow up with that now. Like, I grew up being very afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, they assassinated many, many people during the boomer, like my mother's generation. And as a child of a radical 60s and 70s parent, I was viscerally aware that they will kill you.
Right.
Like that was, I mean, again, like, 10 soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own, 4 dead in Ohio. Like, that was very real. That was not just like, oh, wow, there's the hippies and like, that was very real. That was a real sensation for me as people who went through that and were putting their own lives on the line, and whose friends had all died in Vietnam and who were dying of drug overdoses and who, I mean, it was not this like glamorous rock and roll fantasy or anything that, it seems to be now.
There's this Andy Warhol diary documentary on Netflix that
I want to watch that. I haven't done it yet.
So good. Like, I had no idea. I've been totally in the closet from Andy Warhol. Apparently, no idea what the man
Really?
had done.
Oh,
because it was so accessible. That's what I was thinking this morning. It's like everything that I could have read about that was right in front of me. No interest, but
Warhol is actually way more interesting than you would think, based on how he is in popular culture. He and Edie, I mean, this was a very
But to think about, and you'll see in like the couple of the last episodes of this documentary, they're trying to translate that time to now, and they just can't wrap their heads around it because he was so afraid. It appeared he was very afraid of HIV. Which, because it was new and it was killing everybody, and they really dwelled on this in the documentary, like it was a bad thing, like he was really paranoid about it, and it
wasn't everybody.
Yeah, and like
I grew up terrified.
And the whole, don't drink out of the same cup, and it's like they didn't know, so of course.
Oh, it was insane.
But yet the people that look at it now through today's eyes, we're already so far from it that they can't see why he felt that way, or they don't even know that was how everybody felt. But same with what we're looking at now. Like, they don't have that same fear that you had back then with growing up with that they're killing people, hippies and all the other things. They don't have that context.
That's what I feel like with popular culture. It's like, okay, you can have your tattoos and you can have your hair and you can listen to your rock and roll with your explicit lyrics. We're not going to get upset about that anymore. Yes. But ultimately, we're going to fuck you, right. and get in line, little, and I mean, it's almost like, it's lost. It's lost its teeth. I'm sorry. It really has. Like, it is not, it's just so performative. I know that's
And
what people. It's so fucking performative.
and they don't fit in any context of the time. Like even the chauvinistic male assholes of those times, like that's what you were supposed to be. Like even if you didn't want to be that way, you were expected to be that way. So when they come back 30 years later and say some dude did something back then, I'm like, well, of course they did. That's what they all did. What they were supposed to do.
Absolutely. No, the fact that anybody that held themselves accountable for that time frame, was again such a big deal, and actual, rightfully so. And then you've got people that are, horribly transgressive now, and it's being laughed off,
Right.
like, and it's like, yeah, but we have come this whole phase of time, and this whole bro fucking culture is brutal. In some ways, to me, it's worse now, because
It is.
before, like you said, it was just the norm.
Yeah.
That's just the way it was. Whereas now, people are obviously really personally fucking committed to being that way.
Yes.
They're not just going along because whatever, but they're actually okay people
They
for the
they
most part,
yeah,
because
yeah,
now they're just
yeah.
actually
They
fucking
have
dicks.
chosen the
Yeah,
path.
they have
Yes.
chosen the exactly. No, it's like, though, the gaslighting now
Mhm.
is like, I mean, as bad as it was, and as much as we've reclaimed certain things and can talk about stuff now in a way we couldn't before, that's amazing. The backlash gaslighting is so just, I don't know, I can't even.
I cannot. I
Ugh.
cannot. That's the phrase
You know,
of the day. I cannot.
I cannot.
Cannot.
Um,
I
I
was.
cannot. Okay, so I'm going to quote a show, of course, that has also been vetted as some asshole running it, but Firefly, of course,
Yes.
was a great show, even
Yeah.
though what's his name is apparently a rapist too, or whatever.
Yes.
Everybody's a rapist.
Everybody's a
But
rapist.
anyway, I cannot abide useless people is the line
Yes.
from that show. That's like my favorite,
Yes. It's
my
true.
favorite fucking ever. Just there's just the privilege now, the type of privilege we're experiencing now, the type of income disparity, the type of social disparity. It's like, it may have been bullshit back in the day that I could like pull myself up from my bootstraps,
Right.
but it sort of seemed still like real. Like, okay,
Right.
you could just like work a job and be an honest, responsible, intelligent person and like get through your life. And now it's like, no, of course not. That's like not how it works. You totally have to be just completely full of shit and manipulating people out of as much money as possible all the time. And if you're not ripping people off constantly, you're just an idiot. I mean, there's no like work ethic, American hard work and ingenuity. Give me a fucking
Reminds me
break.
of the bullshittery of the self-made person. He's a self-made.
Uh,
There is no such thing as self-made. I can reference several books that could explain this to people. No such thing as self-made. Everyone who is self-made had some leg up somewhere, some advantage. No one is like at zero and pulls themselves up 100% all on their own.
well, it's like fucking Kardashian bitch being all like, people just don't want to work. You should
Yes.
be fucking inheriting millions of dollars and like show your ass and get
Yes.
on the cover
You
of these
just
magazines that are run by these fucking idiots. Like, yeah, you should do that. Like, what's your problem? I mean, like, give me a fucking break. And again, we had we fought a war. I mean, literally in this country, I mean, again, people fucking died. People suffered horribly for our civil rights. And now people that have so little respect for that, like when to see women have no fucking respect for the people that made their privilege possible and then shit on other fucking women, like, fuck you. You need to go fucking die. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah,
that is so disgusting.
yeah.
That is so fucking disgusting. I am so disgusted with this celebrity privilege drama narrative that we care about these people for no fucking reason. There is no fucking reason. They are useless people. They have done nothing but talk shit about other people. They have literally no purpose other than to distract a bunch of negative narcissistic people from their own personal hell. I don't know. Like, is this what we fought and died for? If you're just gonna flush the whole fucking thing down the toilet? Because I don't it's just, it's mind-boggling.
And that people
It's
cannot
just,
see it. Like,
yeah.
Like, I used to see it and be like, okay, I see it, and sometimes you just kind of want to accept that vapid bullshit and enjoy it for a moment. But I always saw it, like, for what it was. But these other folks, they just buy into it, and they take it, and they have no idea.
That's the thing. It's not harmless. If it was actually harmless and it was just distraction, then fine, but it's not.
Yep.
It's not at all. You know, and it's like, you know, I'm sorry, people, you need to have a little fucking backbone. And I'm speaking to myself also and say, you know, compassion. I have a lot of compassion for people and their suffering and their ignorance. And I also feel like people have a lot of potential and deserve just basic human respect. But when you totally abuse a position of power, no matter how small or large that position may be, when your whole position of privilege is used simply to abuse other fucking people and then lie about it, I'm sorry, you're a waste of fucking space. And you are now a very dangerous person. And this is what, you know, to me, this is what we were fighting. This is why, you know, you listen to reggae music. This is why you meditate. This is why you do this stuff. It's not a game. It's not a party. You know, this is supposed to serve something, and I don't see that happening, and I haven't seen that for a long time, and I've been calling this shit out since I was a little kid, being like, you taking drugs and going to your parties is not a fucking revolution, okay? It's not. You have to pick up a fucking shovel and do the goddamn work. And stop passing it off onto somebody else and then acting like you're God's gift to the fucking world. And all these people I grew up with in these fancy fucking new age private schools, and all of these people singing their own fucking praises about how they're going to save the world, have done nothing but rip people off. I mean, really, the exception proves the fucking rule, because I guarantee you, some people say, but so-and-so, I'm like, exactly. But all the other people I'm talking about are completely full of shit, and these morons just line up and go, here, take my money.
Take my money. Yes,
yeah,
you cannot call yourself an activist by tweeting. You cannot be an activist.
Those people are better than the people I'm talking about. Okay, like those are activists.
But the self-titled, everybody who's like, I'm an activist. No, you cannot call yourself an activist and not have been out on the streets. When you're just posting on Facebook, you just can't.
Well, you have to show up in your life, you know, and most of that shit is like
showing up.
It's unseen. Yes. You know, you have to be willing to make the sacrifice when nobody's going to see it, when nobody's going to give you any fucking credit for it. You know, that's where it actually matters, in your family, at your job. You know, this is what actually is impacting the world. And if you're not actually, and again, we all have our limitations, but you know, if you're just repeating the sounds good, which is, again, the whole fucking new age movement, everybody's just parroting all this shit. Oh, I went to this party and I did LSD with so-and-so, and I know the fucking Hopi Indians, and, you know, I mean, it's all just like, okay, and this means what now? Like, what have you done?
What did that
Who
do
are
for
you? Like, so,
and now
I met this person, so that means you're somebody? I mean, I went to see the Dalai Lama. Well, obviously you didn't listen.
Right. Great. and now you're back doing the same shit that you were doing before.
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
Yeah. And it's like, I get, again, with the Christianity, with the Buddhism, with all of this and the compassion and everything, but there is a fucking line here. Like, you can't just keep beating a dead horse, as they say. Like, there is a line where it's like, look, the door has been held open for you, okay? I have dealt with you with integrity, and you have come back with nonsense. So you're going to have to find your own fucking way now. Like, that is not my responsibility. And there's a lot of this codependent manipulation going on in these groups that it's like, oh, well, everybody's flawed, so you have to kind of accept these people because they're going to become better people. And it's like, are they, though? Are they going to become better people? Or are you just now perpetuating trauma onto good people because we're being forced to accept these fucking abusers into our group because everybody's the same?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No.
No, it's that inability to balance the good and the bad, which everyone has. Oh, these poor people out there have always not been able to deal with this. As far as believing that, I mean, you're either really those hippie-ish, very good accepting. They're all the way over there, and then
Zero boundaries.
Yes, and then there's the other negativity. So it's, but they can't ever accept, and I think that's where when you go on a trip and they have a bad trip, or what's called a bad trip, or to them it's bad, they can't process that because like they don't understand that this universe is made of good and bad, and that that's okay, and that that's like supposed to be there. Like there's a mixture, and you can't have all just white light, and at least I don't think so, white light and happiness and hippiness.
Well, yeah, sometimes a bad trip is actually really waking up to some super hard truths.
Exactly.
And that can actually, kind of destroy your life.
Right.
Because you're no longer able to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a survival mechanism. And you're not functional. You don't have the tools to function. And that's the problem again with all this kind of cultural appropriation. And somebody asked me recently, like, what's the deal? What's the problem with white people and these new age cults and this appropriation? Like, we understand like the simple things of like irresponsible people like claiming they're shamans and making up weird stories about shit that is totally unreal and putting on certain clothes. Like, there's the obvious appropriation. But what's the deal with these people that actually have some legitimacy? They're not actually completely frauds at all. They're actually carrying real knowledge. They're actually practicing it to legitimately to a great degree. But what the fuck is the deal? Why is this not working? Why are these movements ultimately failing? Because they are. And why are they becoming so problematic? And it's very simple. Because they won't fucking back it up. Because they won't create real community. They won't do the real work. They'll sit in the ceremony. They'll sit in the meditation hall. They'll do a great deal, and they will give a lot of themselves. And it's not like they're all horrible people, but at the end of the fucking day, they won't go the distance, and they will still play these hierarchical games. They will not acknowledge what these ceremonies and these practices are truly rooted in and why they're truly needed. There's a limit to what they will go up against, and they ultimately become cult leaders yet again because they just want this following, and they're not actually building an alternative society. They want, again, the spiritual fucking bypass. I'm doing this, so I'm a good person, and that's all I need to do. No, it is a lot harder than that. You have to be willing to go the distance, and you have to mean it, and you have to be honest about it. And they're just not. They're just not. That's not what they're up. They're not up for that. They didn't sign up for it.
I was thinking about somebody I just heard, a guru themselves, who was talking about ayahuasca and other things, and they were saying they couldn't do the whole. They didn't want to, because it's ayahuasca is the one drug, but then there's what, MD something or DMT or I don't know what.
DMT is like the short version,
Yeah.
and
Right.
it's a condensed
Right.
version of it
Okay.
that you smoke,
Oh, okay.
and it lasts about 20 minutes.
So,
And it's basically like ayahuasca, but on this very
so yeah.
short
So that's what they were
intensity.
talking about as far as that, and they're like, "Well, we can't do the ayahuasca because I don't want. I mean, go out to the desert and I'd be vomiting and pissing and shitting and for days." And it's like, well,
Yeah, I don't want to do that
that's
either.
yeah, I don't want to do that either. But that's kind of to me was like, but yet you're gonna take the fast route, the easier route. I don't know if I'm gonna experience like the whole thing. I probably would do that. Just
Well, I'll say I didn't experience the DMT route till after over 15 years of a lot of other very very much did the throwing up and the all night and the whole
yes,
been down that
yeah,
road. So I was like, yeah, the short version I can do
yes,
that. I can't really handle the rest of it. But I'll tell you this. There are a couple different levels to the DMT experience. If you have the death experience on DMT, which is kind of what
right.
the goal is, you don't always have that experience.
Yes, we should
You
say
can do
that's
DMT.
some people say that's the connection is you're experiencing what the death
Yeah, because
chemical
DMT
feels like.
is in your
Yeah.
brain at birth and death. Yeah. So that's what the Sonoran Toad, everybody is like trying to have the death
Right.
experience, right? So I'm going to say, as somebody who's had the death experience, whoo, it may technically be 20 minutes, but
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
like 8 hours
Mm-hmm.
condensed into like this
Yes.
tiny, like,
Yes.
yo, okay, once was
Yes.
enough. Let's put it that way. Um, and yeah, you don't always have that experience. There's kind of, you can have there's a lot of different experiences you can have. But when you actually go through the tunnel and see the white light and the dead people come talk to you and you feel like your face is being torn off, you're kind of like, I'm
Oh,
glad I have some meditation training because I'd be losing it right
yes.
now.
Yes.
I would not want to go
That
into that
that
without
was
training.
that was
No,
the
I would not want to
scariest.
go into that without training. Yeah.
That was the scariest part for me as an observer, even for someone's first time. Like they hit it perfectly. Like they got all of what they wanted, but to watch them come out of that and be like, how long was I dead? Like they were convinced they were dead and gone, and they had moved quite quite the distance. And then they came back, and the depression that comes then of because it was a good experience,
Mm.
very positive. Like
Hmm.
they realized their full selves,
Yeah, you feel like a
you know.
sense of total love.
And then you come back into. I guess that's probably why babies cry so much. I'd say because they're coming into this shit. And one thing I did note of the what I was reading about Timothy Leary was his death, and he wrote about it as the belief he believed that it was the merging with the entire life process. And I like that quote because that sounds like what I've been thinking of it as all this time anyway. The merging, and from what I've experienced and observed myself, everyone's just kind of merging.
Well, I put out a song called Messages by Dreams a while back.
Mm.
And it's actually about a lot of that experience very specifically. And that was very much kind of the message was just a sense of there's nothing to be afraid of, a total sense of love and connectedness. And this message was that this is what is in your future, like that this will be what you experience was this this thing. I don't know what
Do you find
to
that most people have you ever seen anybody have this experience and a death experience that was negative, like really bad?
I don't know because I've only done DMT with like 2 or 3 other people, and I've only done it a couple times, so I don't really know what other people experience. I do have a friend who did die, who was clinically dead and brought back from a drug overdose, and he described a very similar
Because
experience.
everything I've heard, like of people who really have died and come back, and then others who have drug-wise done so, um, it's always positive. Like it's always that
Hmm.
last moment, like the Timothy Leary's last moments, as far as what was written, was he asked why and clenched his fists, and then he said why not and unclenched his fists,
Right.
and then his last words, according to his son, was beautiful. And that's the same story that like I hear over and over, is that last moment that they're conscious, and to say anything, it's always something positive. It's always like a gasp of, oh, in a good way. Like, oh, it all makes sense, and oh, this is beautiful and this is good.
Yeah, yeah, like again, all of this other shit just doesn't matter,
Yeah.
and that's what's so weird that people are so attached
Hmm.
to
And
it
that we spend all this
because
time doing that shit.
it's so pointless, and
Hmm.
that's just and it's like I just don't want to spend and I didn't want to spend any of my life doing this,
Right.
and I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing this. I don't it's not it's totally self-created. It's totally self-created. And we're all caught up in it. I mean,
Right.
that's how I see
Yes. Right.
karma. I mean, I know the Buddhists have the whole
Hmm.
reincarnation thing and everything that everybody's all attached to, but it does span multiple lifetimes one way or the other. I don't know if spirits are reincarnated or how that works, but obviously energy doesn't disappear.
Right.
We're all just
Hmm.
different versions of things,
Yes.
matter and energy changing over time. So I do think there's a longevity to existence. I don't think there's a longevity to me,
Right.
this ego finite. But but to me that is karma in that we are all born into the fabric of this time space continuum, and there's a story already in motion.
Hmm. Yes.
I was born into what I was born into. There's a whole story already set in motion that I have very limited control over.
Yes.
And so yeah, I think the idea of karma is actually really interesting to explore, and I feel like how it's used in general within the spiritual communities is very hurtful and short-sighted and again uninteresting. It's
Yes.
like the word and you know
Hmm.
what some people have said about it. It gives you no authority to throw it around as some like I've had people say like,
It's a
well, it's your
it's a
karma. I'm
punishment.
like,
It's
yeah, I'm
almost,
like, how
if
the
they
fuck do
use the
you
word, you know.
how the fuck do you know who's
Yeah.
karma? I mean, like, you
Exactly.
don't know what you're talking
Yes.
about. Like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's become so enmeshed in the popular culture and all these really unhealthy narratives, which is why these like new age yoga people are all going and following QAnon and shit. Like, because they're not
Yeah.
thinking about any of this stuff. It's like somebody told them, they need to have good karma, and they're like, okay, everybody needs to have good karma. You need to have good karma. Jesus said, have good
Have
karma.
good
I mean, they're
karma.
like a complete fucking wreck, and it's just so
Hmm.
exhausting. And so again, it's like you yourself are not demonstrating good karma by saying that. If you
Right.
believe in karma,
That's so
wielding
true.
karma as
Yes.
a violent weapon is not
Yes.
good karma. Like, hello?
Exactly.
Like, I mean,
Um, Most people's definition of
uh,
karma is just the act of simply existing long enough to repeat other people's experiences. Because that's what
it,
karma is, such bullshit to me, when as far as what people use it as like, oh well, see, it finally happened to you. I'm like, well, yeah, if you live long enough, you're going to experience the same shit everybody else did.
right. And look, people have been trying to explain why bad things happen to good people for a long
Mm.
time. Does anybody remember the story of Job in the fucking
Yes,
Bible and Old
poor
Testament?
fucking Job.
People have been
Yes.
trying to explain the fact
Hmm.
that, so now it's this whole, well, God tests you.
Right.
Like, bad shit happens,
Yes, it
people.
happens.
And it is not that's to me what karma means. While you have some ability to
Hmm.
influence
Right.
within the sphere of your own actions, the thing about karma is that it is also beyond your control.
Correct.
That you are subject to this vast tapestry of experiences, and that even if you do the right thing, it does not mean you're going to get some magic fucking reward. Again, no good deed goes unpunished. The trials of Job. People have been pointing this out for thousands of fucking years, that it's not that simple, that people are complicated. And it's not this, there's this whole virtue signaling of like, I'm a superior spiritual person, therefore I have more money and nothing bad happens to me. That is just complete fucking bullshit. On a grander scale, like, my life is a fucking hell pit, okay? Like, horrible shit has happened to me. And yet, because in my view, I have shown up in a certain way for my life, there is things for which are wonderful. It doesn't solve all my problems, but in the big picture, if I was a much more of a shithead, yeah, my life would suck a lot harder, even if I had more privilege. In the bigger picture, because of my actions, in spite of all the shitty things, there are other things, you know, it has a whole different quality to it. It's not this, like, it's not transactional.
Right.
Like these capitalist fucking psychos think everything is fucking transaction. It's not transactional. It's life, you fucking assholes. I am so tired of the shit. It's not that hard to understand. That's why I feel like all these people purposefully manipulate this stuff, because it's actually really easy. It's not difficult, and that's what they don't like about it. And so they're like, oh, let's make up this whole story so we don't have to actually have integrity.
And they absolutely recognize it and say, like, oh, it's that easy? And, oh, well, we can't let them know that. We cannot let them go there.
They're not going to mine our silver if we tell them it's fucking easy.
Exactly. Not at all.
Mm.
Did you know that Leary's goddaughter was Winona Ryder?
I did not. You know Winona Ryder's from fucking Petaluma?
Yeah, yeah. And
Northern California.
Some of the names is Allen Ginsberg, Aldous Huxley, William Burroughs, Jack Kerouac. Some of my favorites. Leading and talk about
Alan Watts.
Alan Watts, yes. Cults. Talking about cults. Also, a name would be Genesis Breyer Peorage.
Oh, we're gonna go down that road, are we?
Of whom you always have a fascinating reaction every time. Anytime I've ever brought it up to you, you have an interesting reaction.
Oh, that's because I know people who know people.
And
I'm a little bit of 1 degree separation from a lot of this shit.
Yes. You're another fabric of connection to all the things.
There's how it looks from the outside, and there's how it actually is.
And now, see, that's a good example of, at least in my life, that I've read everything that I can about Genesis, and everything that Genesis has written and done, as far as I'm aware.
Right. Well, Psychic TV is definitely totally connected to this narrative. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and it's like, I see where there's holes and there's like problems, and I'm sure there's a lot more there than, because you write your own history. So.
Have you read Cozy's autobiography?
No. I should.
Yes.
Writing that down.
I haven't read it, but from what I hear, you should read it.
Okay.
If you want to know from the actual insiders what their opinions are,
yes.
From what I understand, Cozy did write about
that, and that would be a good place to go from where I am, because I think I'm kind of tapped out on Genesis and the entire Psychic TV and the Temple of Psychic Youth and all that. But and I saw how, like, it could be bad and it could be good, but like I took the good from it and just kind of left it there. But other people, I can see how they'd be completely wrapped up and not so.
Well, it's not sincere.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in theory, it's I was when I heard about it, I was like, oh, that's very interesting, because yeah, they're, riffing on the whole psychedelic movement and playing with consciousness and experimenting, and it's all fine, except for that it's not sincere. Except for these people have no authority, except for these people don't know what they're doing. They're abusive, and they're just getting theirs out of the whole thing, and bad things happen. They don't know what they're doing, and they're claiming that space, and they're claiming that influence because of their position of privilege ultimately, and they get their own issues and everything. It's a mixed bag, but they're taking their trauma out on people instead of healing it. And that's just, I'm sorry. I get it. We're all traumatized. We're all dealing with that shit. We all have our own abuses that we can hold ourselves accountable for. But it has to be honest. It has to be everybody's holding themselves accountable. And they're doing so authentically, not just to manipulate other people, just like Scientology. That's all like totally manipulating people into holding themselves accountable so that they can join this cult. It's like, oh, everybody else needs to hold themselves accountable. Yep. But it's not. It's totally in bad faith.
Yeah, that's where it strays completely. I can see that. Like the people that get involved, of course, they get misled, and like because they just want to release themselves into these safe places, and they don't want to have the control. They would love someone else who they believe in to control their environment in the way that they hope that they will, but then they don't.
And again, there's no authenticity. There is no actual community building. They haven't done anything to support anybody or change the world at all. They have just they've basically appropriated somebody else's work. They're manipulating it and experimenting with it, and they're doing so irresponsibly. And then they're claiming that they have some kind of, whatever, and tricking a lot of people into it because there may have been some peripheral result that was favorable. Somebody might have gotten something very positive out of it. Somebody might have people get shit out of Scientology all the time. People get shit out of Christianity. It's not that there's never any positive result, but they can't claim credit for that. That's entirely incidental. Somebody was lucky enough to gain their own insight out of this, social experiment that is ultimately still a power trip. It just is. It's ultimately still a power trip. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't seek authorities that might. They're claiming the authority. They're putting themselves in the position of power, and they're not seeking the fact that there are actually authorities, and they're not subjecting themselves to a humble path before they go putting themselves on a fucking pedestal and manipulating other people's consciousnesses.
I can tell that when anybody
So that's why they end up falling out of burning fucking buildings. Sorry. Oh my God, I'm going to get so much hate mail for this shit. I can't believe I just said that. Sorry.
Well, there we have.
Oh God, we're getting way too close to home right now.
Yeah.
Woo,
I don't even know what I was about to say. So.
Yeah, I gotta get the fuck out of this Bauhaus circle. It's insane. It's fucking insane. The industrial scene, fuck it. Okay, the industrial scene, the gothic scene, this whole fucking scene needs a fucking reckoning. There is so many fucking abusers out there. It is so full of itself. It is so full of shit. And it is so obsessed with its own, I don't know what. It is just, I'm fucking narcissistic vampire ego. It's bullshit. It's fucking fantasy.
That's kind of what it is.
It's a bunch of white people parading around like vampires. Right. Like, really?
I mean, that is what it is on the surface. So that's like the root of it.
Yeah, it's so and again,
obvious that it's so true.
You give people the benefit of the doubt because initially, again, people were exploring new art forms. They were, in my opinion, perpetuating the narrative of the psychedelic culture of the 60s. That was the perpetuation of the underground. This was a gender inclusive scene That was very fundamental, and it still is. You know, there were important things to this scene, that reasons why real people showed up and took refuge in this fucking scene, and people have done nothing but abuse it and continue to abuse it. And I'm disgusted. I am disgusted. I'm appalled. I am unsympathetic, and I don't care. You can do better. I don't need to forgive you for your shortcomings. I don't need to go, oh, but we're all having a good time. Well, we're not all having a good time, okay? We're not. The house is burning down. You've got your own little micro niche based on the sacrifices of generations before you, mostly women and people of color, and you can go fuck yourself, because I'm not gonna. So...
That is correct.
So, oh God, I'm just gonna tell everybody to fuck off today. I'm so fucking done with culture.
Everybody
Culture
can fuck off today.
Everybody can fuck off. But really, no, it pisses me off.
Yeah.
If you're not claiming integrity, plenty of people are not claiming integrity.
Right.
They're not claiming anything. They're just doing their thing. I don't care about you so much.
Right.
But these people are abusing a sacred trust, basically, that does not belong to them. And they're totally caught up in their own ego trip. And they're benefiting financially from it. That's the whole point. And even if it's indirectly, or they're getting their drugs, or they're getting their sex, or they're getting whatever. And I'm not interested in playing that game or pretending I'm playing that game. And if people who are associating with me don't take me at my word because they can't be taken at their word, then that's on them. Right. Because I've said the same thing my whole fucking life. I've always been upfront with people about what I'm doing. I write it in my lyrics. If you're too stupid to pay attention and you think I'm somebody else and you treat me like that, then that's on you. I didn't show up that way, and I never have. And if you took any of my expressions in the wrong way and have made assumptions about me, again, I'm sorry. That's fucking on you, and I'm done.
What do they always say? When someone tells you who they are, believe them.
It goes both ways. It goes both ways. And that's the thing. I'm forgiving because I don't expect people to have, a lot of integrity, because why would I? I don't expect people to be particularly aware. Why would I? Like, that would be stupid. So I try to mitigate that, though, with saying, like, well, I'm not going to say this person is a genius or whatever, but, they have worth, they have value as a human being. Like, I'm going to treat them with respect. Unless I find out that they're just totally running game,
Before we get all fucked up because we believe that everybody's a human being, and there's a starting point there for everybody, and then you give them that little something.
Well, it's a whole journey, I think, to learn how to do it properly, because the whole thing of you can't go through your life hating people.
Right.
If you hate the people who have wronged you, then you have to live with that. There's a certain truth to that, And so trying to understand what the boundaries of that are, because if you really are trying to create a different reality, if that really is what your intention is. And of course, I grew up with the whole rock and roll revolution and the idea that you could change the world through music and Jimi Hendrix and all that, and there was truth to that. And there was a lot of change through music, but there are limits to that also, and it's mostly been co-opted, and it's just a lot of people repeating shit they've heard somewhere else. Again, there's very few authentic voices. Mostly people are just getting on stage and rock and rolling and doing their drugs, and I'm sorry to break it to you people, it really is, if that's what floats your boat, woohoo, go for it. But if you think it's anything other than that, if you're trying to put on this pretense that it's anything more than just fucking McDonald's, I'm sorry, it's not. It's just not. If you're going to talk about a change the world fucking narrative and you're going to get people to follow you because of that, you better be fucking changing the world.
Yes.
Or shut the fuck up.
Let
somebody else, have a word.
Yes. And people talk about them getting spun up into we're entering into this period, this time now where like new people on the earth, new people of the earth don't even know like that they're picking it all up from other places and that they're just regurgitating it. There was a moment in time where we kind of knew that, like you knew you were repeating something unique that came before you, but now they really think they're unique, but really they're just regurgitating like thousands of years of stuff that's already happened, and it seeped into their consciousness. But they think I am so special. I am so unique. And
I
I'm
know
up here
the
on
answer.
stage.
I got the
Yes.
gold
I
star.
got the gold star. Oh my god.
Ah, yeah. You know, so like I don't have a lot of friends.
No, me neither. And like yourself, I am finding it harder and harder to even vet people because I think I'm so careful myself in my own circles to vet these people, and then I come to find that they too are assholes and are manipulating, and they have their own. It's like, and they kind of, I mean, to give them credit, they did indicate that. I just ignored it
Didn't see. I know. I know.
because I was hopeful because there was so much good there. There's always just
I
so
know.
much good.
There's
And
always so much good that you
always.
just the red
Um,
flags kind of, and then all of a sudden there's
um,
this mountain of red flags. You're like,
yes.
oh boy,
Yeah.
that's not
Yes.
so good.
Because I never write off anybody completely. Like I've been that way just naturally, and now that I've learned things, I'm that way purposely. Like bad people have done some good stuff, and
Oh well, sure.
and
That's the tricky part.
yeah, and the
Yeah, and good
reasoning,
people have done bad
right,
things. Yeah.
and their reasoning, like if someone does something and their reason behind it wasn't evil, you can usually, if you talk to them, you can usually understand why they did it, even if it was fucked up. But it makes sense in their realm. So it's like that's why in today's world where there's right and wrong, and like both parties cannot agree to anything because God forbid they agree with the other side at all. That's so disturbing to me because like there's always truth in everything, and there's always some good across the aisle. To use that term too much, but
Not always, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
yeah,
Not always. Unfortunately, there are conditions where it is a non. I'm sorry if you're burning a cross on my front yard. There's
well,
just not a whole lot of places we can go with that. And
that's
even
good
so,
point. Good point.
right? Okay.
Yes.
As an organization, now as an individual, I
Right.
know people that have absolutely helped KKK members get out of the KKK and see the truth because they were just brainwashed,
Right.
individuals.
Well, and I guess
On
that's
an
what I mean. Like, yeah.
individual level,
Yeah, on an
yes.
individual level. If you talk
On
to
an
those people,
organizational
No,
level, no, you
no.
can't fix the KKK. You can only get people to get out of the KKK.
Correct.
There's you don't
Yeah.
bargain.
Yes.
You
Oh,
don't
no.
you don't reach across the
No,
aisle
no,
like
not to
with
the
that.
no. I am specifically speaking individually. If I
Right.
must
And so that's what
disclaim.
I'm making the clarity on. Yes,
Yes.
with certain individuals who are
Yes.
not psychopaths,
Yes.
yes, who do have some good faith. Unfortunately, the hardest thing to come to terms with is certain people, even if they appear good at certain points, just have no
Oh, yeah.
good
They
faith.
can
They
be
just
far
don't.
gone.
It will.
Absolutely.
It's just not going to happen.
Yes.
And it's a drag. It's
a
a drag. They're so, yeah, it's all the front. They're just so used to there only being a front. There just isn't anything else. And they can't imagine that anybody has actually spent their life developing themselves.
Right.
That they do have a self,
Yes.
and that they are in touch with that self. As imperfect as that self may be, they actually have a self, and they're coming from that place. And it's just, it's so impossible. It's just such an impossible thing that, again, is why we have LSD. It was so impossible There was they could sit in front of the Dalai Lama or Krishnamurti for a lifetime or 50 lifetimes, and it's not going to make a fucking difference. We're talking the consciousness we're dealing with right now is so reinforced by like 50 miles of brick and steel that while there may be something in there, you're not going to reach it.
Yes.
That's the fucking sad fucking truth. And so, you know, the LSD was something for in some cases, a way to break through a lot of that, however flawed random people are within it. But you can't rely on that either.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the beginning.
You gotta grow from it.
And also, this is going to be work.
Yes.
Okay, we are talking about challenging. This is going to be work. You're going to have to change your whole life, and you're going to have to show up for that, and you're going to have to support people, and not just in this lip service dance around in the wilderness kind of way. Like, I'm sorry,
it's
like,
not the
it's
magical
just
hill at all.
no, the whole
not the
movement was
answer.
just so sexist and so racist, and continues to be. So you've got all these subsequent cultures appropriating that, not going deeper and deconstructing the problems with it, just perpetuating it and actually gutting it of the substance that it actually did have that you could respect. And that's what I see, you know, in popular culture now, where it's just like, okay, now it's just been completely diluted and, you know, is being passed around by these fucking morons, and they're being put up on these pedestals because they happen to say a few words that sound like they're somewhat self-aware. And it's just, again, it's total. That's why my record label's called False Idols. Like, that's, you know, and I did that before Tricky. Just have to point that out. I'm getting tired of that. I have been here for a long time.
Yes.
Nobody's noticed, but I've been here. And yeah, because it's just a lot of it's just so lazy. It's just so lazy.
Yes. So be prepared to do the work if you're going to do anything about it. And if you do anything about it, make sure you are supervised by people who love you and can monitor you so you do not jump out a window.
Exactly.
Just a
Otherwise,
disclaimer
I'm gonna yell at you.
Yes.
Like, this is what will happen.
Both gonna yell at you. Yeah.
At least it's not just me.
No, not at all. Well, hopefully April will be, I don't know, something else.
Yeah, well, I think we covered a lot of ground there. So maybe next month we'll actually get into some practical, helpful tips for surviving the apocalypse.
That's a good idea. That's a great subject title right there. So stay tuned for practical tips to survive the apocalypse on our upcoming shows. And until then, you know, follow us both because, you know, we're quite entertaining.
We're not your average ducks.
Not at all. Go to Attasalina.com or theartistd.com for more. And, you know, thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining
always
us. We'll be
always
back.
A pleasure.
We'll be back in April.